You are now entering Clearview, Illinois city limits. The name of this story is The Bell, Chimes Murder. The bell echoed in the distance, strange and urgently as a harbinger of doom. The chimes only rang out in the dead of night at a time no one should be awake to hear. There was no discernible reason or rationalization for the bells, when, why, or how. There was only unlived-in land for miles in all directions. Remnants of the old settlements before Native Americans were said to have killed the first settlers. The unincorporated land that was overgrown forest, food for the ever-hungry casino, was in fact the site of the original town of Clearview, Illinois. It was unclear exactly where the settlement was or how big it was to begin with, because like most of the official records, 99% of all the structures were razed to the ground. From time to time, someone may unearth an old artifact from that long ago time, but after the casino bought most of the unincorporated lands, no one was legally allowed to wander the area. So, even if they did find something, legally speaking, the smart move was to keep that information to yourself. Willard heard the toiling of bells at night, at random, but most times he was the only soul for miles that could. He was a security guard for Last Bastion Casino, not the glamorous kind that wore suits and tuned people up in back rooms for being problems, but a night guard whose purview was the construction area outside of the casino that most guests would never get to visit, and likely wouldn't care to. The casino was looking to expand into the territory it bought, and had now been leveling some of the forest lands with the option to put a new hotel on it more than likely. Oddly, Willard wasn't invited into the boardroom meetings and consulted, so it wasn't as if he actually knew. He drank his coffee slowly and thoughtfully as he looked out into the deeper forest, just on the edge of what the casino knocked down into the untamed brush. He heard the bells louder than he ever had this night, so the construction crew must have gotten really close to finding this place. Willard hadn't the foggiest why anyone would bother coming out here, let alone bother with ringing bells. When he sipped his coffee down to halfway, he began moving again along the very weak fence put up. Willard stopped abruptly as he started moving again, attempting to lock down the location of a new foreign town. He noticed subtle variations of light coming from the darkened vegetation. He at first thought it was someone running his way with a torch. Willard took a few steps back from the gate to give himself time to dart from danger. Being in his 60s and in passable but not optimal shape made him more keen on deciphering when danger was coming before it happened than merely reacting to it after the fact. What at first glance appeared to be two magnificent hounds proved to be much more. From where Willard was, the beast stood taller than him even before lifting to their hind legs. Their eyes were bright eruptions with swirling fire. Their mouths were cauldrons of dripping magma radiating a raging inferno. Willard tripped over himself to flee. The only thing between them was a flimsy construction gate, so he had no faith that was enough to hold them at bay. He wasn't sure if 5 men with shotguns were enough to hold them at bay. The old security guard ran for his life as the hounds melted the metal gates with their bites. The bell stopped tolling. Willard knew he was at the mercy of these beasts. Inexplicably, the two flaming hounds of hell looked up as if they had been called away and ran back into the forest as mysteriously as they came. Willard's heart was beating out of his chest. He hadn't been as scared as that since he was young. When his old bones allowed his body to function properly, he walked over to the gnawed and metal gate to see just how bad the damage was. He knew he couldn't possibly ignore this, but at the same time he couldn't explain this. His common sense wouldn't let him keep walking the grounds if threats like that were afoot. But what exactly could he tell management? Should he just quit and hope for the best? Willard decided in the end he had to report this, maybe omitting the more supernatural aspects. Even if he did quit, if he didn't warn the next guy, maybe they wouldn't get as lucky as he did. Willard ended up getting the rest of the night off, but was encouraged to come in the next night so that he could explain what happened to experts. Willard didn't mind so long as he wasn't being completely ignored and dismissed. Though he still needed this job, it wasn't so important to him that he'd risk his life. When Willard came to work the next night, he was introduced to men more suited to be a SWAT team than animal catchers. He didn't believe in his wildest dreams management would take him that seriously. The four-man team, equipped with weapons and body armor, insisted that Willard show them the scene. One of the men strategically asked, "Why's the gate burned black right here?" To which Willard had to stumble over the true explanation. While he wasn't excited to tell them what he actually saw, this team of four was relentless. They seemed as if they had it in their mind that whatever happened wasn't altogether natural. Willard broke down and spilled everything he knew, doing it with as much skepticism as he could, so even he could deny what he saw was conjecture. The four men were not deterred and didn't bat an eyebrow. In fact, the experience seemed to focus them up even harder. They entered beyond the apparent safety of the ragged gate and ventured into the unknown forest. They insisted that Willard come along and direct them as to where the sound came, even though he insisted he didn't know enough. They pressed on into the dark with Willard's vague recollections of where the sound may or may not have been coming from. After no longer than 20 minutes, before the men were frustrated enough to question Willard's hazy recollection, the bell rang, loud and long. Willard's hackles rose, and his urge to get a head start back to base washed over him. It didn't take long for the group to find the source of the disturbance. There, not in a clearing so much, but a stretch of well-worn trail trampled down from heavy use, was the tattered and blackened remains of a church. It was in complete disrepair, with chunks of wall missing and most of the stones charred black from fire damage. It was a minor mystery why they hadn't seen this structure before, because it managed to crest slightly over the trees. Despite not having the structural integrity to do so, there was a swinging black bell that moved at the top of a ragged spire. Willard shook his head in denial. The men with the guns told him to hold outside so they could clear the area first, but that hardly mattered to Willard because he wasn't about to go in anyways. The four confident warriors moved into the lifeless husk of a place with guns drawn and light swarming about them. Willard watched because he was too scared to attempt to find his way back on his own. There was no movement for a while, no sound. Eerily so, it was as if all of nature inhaled. Suddenly, Willard saw a bright burst of orange lighting up random windows, directly accompanied by gunfire. He heard the panicky shrieks of men losing their composure to something they couldn't plan for. The orange flickers became persistent until all the dark passages glowed in eerie light. Willard jumped as the flaming carcass of one of his protectors sailed out of one of the top windows and slammed next to him. The man writhed in pain and died before Willard could take a step towards him. Heavy gunfire rang out, mingled with inhuman growls. The foundations of the buildings burned red, and even the dirt went up in flames. The torso of one of the armed escorts halfway tumbled out of the threshold, but was immediately dragged back into a blazing inferno as if he were claimed by the fire itself. Willard took a step back to flee, but held frozen in place when he saw the fire in the threshold move as if it had a mind to do so. The ground rumbled violently, mingled with the persistent toll of the bells. Willard fell from the violent eruption. The building sank into the dirt quickly and deliberately. It didn't sway or crumble. It lowered as if it were being reclaimed by hell. Willard saw the old relic disappear with the bell tower last to slide under. He saw a form in the fire standing by the swinging bell, but it too sank. All that was left was the muffled toll of the bell, until even that faded. Willard picked himself up and looked at the site, which was completely covered, bearing no signs it ever wasn't. He knew that he would be in church this Sunday. You are now exiting Clearview, Illinois city limits. Hope you enjoyed the trip.